Well, thank you, everyone. I want to thank everyone for joining. This training is going to be talking about what to do if you have a loved one go missing. I'm Jan Straub with Jacob Wetterling Resource Center, which is a program of Zero Abuse Project. So hopefully many of you are familiar with Jacob Wetterling Resource Center. We are in our 31st year as an organization. We just completed 2020 as 30 years as an organization, and we continue to work, as Patty Wetterling says, to create a world where all children can grow up safe. And we are not quite there yet, so we continue to do that. But the work that we do is quite a bit of prevention work around any type of child maltreatment, and then supporting and really advocating for families who have a missing loved one. And our motto is a missing loved one, regardless of age, regardless of circumstance, or regardless of time. So a lot of people weren't sure if we were still around after Jacob was recovered, and we are still here. And also many people think that we just support families who have missing children, and that also is not correct. So we would love for you to make it known that we are willing and ready to support. We do a ton of advocacy and education around missing persons. So if you ever have questions, you can certainly reach out, and we can hopefully help you and guide you in the circumstance that's going on. We know that a missing loved one is a very traumatic experience. There's a lot of emotions, a lot of unknowns, and we would never want a family or an individual to have to go through that alone. So that is why we are there. So just a reminder of Jacob. Everything we do is in Jacob's legacy, and we really love the 11 for Jacob, because that was a way, it was very important for the Wetterling family to not focus on how Jacob died, but on how Jacob lived, which is where the 11 for Jacob came out. And we love that it's very kid-friendly. And we also think that if every person in the world picks just one of these things to focus on, this world could be a really wonderful place. So that does seem a little simplistic, but we know that kindness matters, and we know that all of these things matter. And so we are really trying to focus on things that kids can do. And a lot of times kids are kind of told all the things that they can't do. So we like to show the things that they can do. So for more information, just know that you can go to jwrc.org, and that will bring you to the Zero Abuse Project website. And so we don't want you to get confused. We are part of Zero Abuse Project, which is a national organization to work on fighting child maltreatment. But there you can find Jacob Wetterling Resource Center specific things, and then also Zero Abuse Project. So if you're interested in more training, a lot of training around child maltreatment, around child abuse, prosecution of child abuse, signs of child abuse, forensic interviewing, all of those types of things. So please feel free to go and check things out. This is a kind of a call to action that was presented to us in April, last April after COVID. We kind of realized this was going to be a long-term thing. We knew that this kind of safe at home, shelter at home, was not safe for all children and not all individuals. And so we really wanted to make sure that people understood that less eyes on children may make the risks for child abuse a little bit elevated. So this is just a paper that was published from Victor Vieth, myself, and some other people working with Zero Abuse Project, and it's 25 tips responding to child abuse. And so we wrote this in a way that no matter what your profession is, no matter what you do, and even if you're just a parent or a neighbor or someone that knows a child, there's one tip in here that you can use. And the idea, again, is we want to expand this idea. We know that not everyone is a mandated reporter, but if we can increase knowledge and increase awareness of child abuse, hopefully we can create, again, a world where if a child is being maltreated, that people are able to identify that, and that child can get the needs that they need. So In all of our training, not just for children, but adults as well, we know that scared kids are not smarter kids and scared adults are not smarter adults. We know that a lot of times with fear, it creates that moment of being frozen. So the work that we do really is to empower. It's to educate in a way that is not fear-based, but in a way that gives people knowledge and in a way that people can learn and say, now I know what to do. And again, we always tell children, even if they are in a situation where someone is hurting them and they don't know what to do and they do freeze, that's okay. And as a child, if someone is hurting them, it is never, ever, 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 ever their fault. And even if they freeze, that's okay. But the idea with education is to talk about things. And for children and adults, when they're in a situation, that they're able to come back to that moment of learning and say, I think I know what to do, and I can do something about it. A couple books that I just want to share with you that really talk about that, that gut reaction, and we talk to kids about that a lot, is listening to your body and understanding that sometimes your body gives you a warning system and how to really pay attention to that, and understanding that sometimes there are false alarms, but we never want to completely minimize it. So The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker was his initial book, really talking about that gut reaction. And then the second one he wrote for parents to really guide children through that, and it's called Protecting the Gift. So these are just two resources we like to give families and people in general, just to kind of understand that. Who forms your net? When we talk to children, we go out and do prevention ed, and we always ask children, who are the 5 adults that keep you safe and healthy, regardless how old they are. So if we're talking to preschool kids or we're talking to kids in high school, we want every child to have 5 adults that they can go to if they need help, if they're in a situation over their heads, if they don't know what to do, if they have a peer that has disclosed something to them. And the 5 adults, again, are someone you need help or someone you know needs help. And we want it to be 5 because we know that not every adult can solve every problem, and we never want a child going to an adult not helping them, and then that child thinking, I guess nobody can help me. We have a net because the net symbolizes connection. We want children, even very young, to understand disconnecting and isolating behaviors. You should never have anyone in your net that's saying, I'm the only one that loves you. I'm the only one that cares about you. I'm the only one you should talk to. I'm the only one that you trust. Healthy, safe adults keep you connected to other healthy, safe adults. So for children in your lives, we just ask you to just do this exercise with children and ask them to write down and tell you the 5 adults that they have in their life that they would go to if they had a problem. And the interesting thing is you may find out about some adults in your child's life that you may not know or you've never heard of, which again is a very good conversation. And if your child is having a hard time coming up with 5, this is where you want to brainstorm and think of people in the community, think of people in families, at their school, in their neighborhood. But we just want to make sure that we expand that net so children have multiple people that they can go to. So let's get right into talking about missing persons. And anytime you talk about missing persons, you may hear the letters NCIC. NCIC is the database that all missing persons should be entered in. And that stands for the National Crime Information Center. And this is actually housed by the FBI. And this is all states. It goes into the same database. As you guys know, probably in the past, states used to be very separated from other states, and it would go into one database and it wouldn't be shared. So this is a database that gets shared across the nation. I'll talk about it a little bit later, but we have known in the past there have been some situations with tribal law enforcement that either did not have access to NCIC were not able to get information into this database, or information was not being put into this database. So that is one thing that we are still it's kind of a work in progress. But this is really the national database that if anyone goes missing, regardless of age, regardless of circumstance, everyone should be in here. And they have different categories. One is juvenile runaway. And I will tell you at Jacob Wetterling Resource Center, we never use the term runaway. We know that that has a lot of stigma attached to it. We also don't use that if it's a child. If it's a child younger than 8, we wouldn't say it's a runaway 2-year-old, right? And we never use the term with adults, right? Oh, it's an adult runaway. It's always a missing person. So we use that term. Unfortunately, database and law enforcement does use the term runaway. But this is anyone under the age of 21. This is actually new. It used to just be, 18 and under. So understanding, again, we're going to extend that up to 21. And this is just basically, we don't know where they are. Endangered is when there is something going on that we believe that person is at risk. This is something I talk to parents quite a bit when they are reporting their child as being missing. And first of all, really not liking that term runaway. And so I try to explain to them that is, unfortunately, just a category. But helping them understand, is there something that law enforcement should know as to why you think they're not safe? And so I think sometimes that is a disconnect when people are making a report to law enforcement. It's either, well, we think this kid is just out doing something fun, versus we really think that this child is at risk. And for the most part, probably at risk, right? That's just my experience working in this. Certainly we do have kids that go for whatever reason and don't let parents know who they are, but most of the kids that get reported as missing have things going on. And I'll talk about this a little bit later too, but there's 2 major questions that we kind of look at when we have someone who's missing, especially adolescents. What are they running from, or who are they running to? And a lot of times, the answer to either of those 2 questions is something that's not good, right? Something that's either going on in that adolescent's life where they're not safe, or they're running possibly to someone who also may not be safe. So we really want to be looking at that. So endangered could be mental health situations. It could be a medical diagnosis. They're missing and they don't have their meds, or they need to be monitored for something. It could be some type of risk that there's a threat, something going on. I had a situation, it was a missing 14-year-old, and mom was a little concerned, and she just really didn't feel like law enforcement was taking it seriously. Just felt like this 14-year-old had just gone on a little joy ride with her boyfriend and, whatever else. And so I was, trying to have an understanding from the mom of why, right, her gut was on fire, right? So I was asking her, what is it about the situation that is making you so worried and so uncomfortable? And she told me that her daughter has tried to break up with this boyfriend numerous times. And when she breaks up or tries to break up, he then tells her that he's going to commit suicide. That's a huge risk, right? And so I asked if she shared that with law enforcement, and she said she did not. And basically she said, well, they never asked, right? So these are some of the things that we really want to help families navigate through the system, help with connecting with law enforcement, making sure that they're getting all the information that's necessary. Some of those things are really difficult. And so when she was able to talk to law enforcement about what was going on, she was, her category was switched to runaway to endangered person. Involuntary, that's just anyone, any age who is missing and we don't know why. A lot of these come into play for people who have gone out hiking or bike riding or gone on a motorcycle ride or one of those things where we think there may be something that happened and it could potentially be an accident. Disabled person, so we do have, unfortunately, people with disabilities who leave a group home or walk away from a nursing home or those types of things. So we know, again, those people may be more at risk because they may not have meds or the resources to be able to keep them safe. Catastrophic catastrophe victims, this is typically if we think of a hurricane like Hurricane Katrina, if we think of, those type of events, if we were to have a blizzard or a tornado here and we had people missing due to that event that was going on. So in Minnesota, we have not had those cases for a long time, but it certainly could happen here. And then other is just, we just don't know. And typically a lot of adults get put into the other. And you will hear from law enforcement quite often that adults have the right to go missing. But in Minnesota, a missing person, if you would like to make a missing person report, law enforcement is required to take that report. So there are 4 resources that I did send to Sarah that she sent out, and one is actually the Minnesota statute. And it states that a law enforcement agency shall accept without delay any report of a missing person. The law enforcement agency shall not refuse to accept a missing person report based on the person is an adult, right? And it goes through all of these. I will tell you, sometimes this is news to law enforcement. So it's good to have that statute. There is not a waiting period, right? The 24 hours is not a thing. It maybe used to be a thing, and especially with children, it is never a thing. We know a lot of times in missing person cases that time is of the essence. So if for whatever reason you cannot find someone, we want you to call law enforcement. And if you're having trouble with that report, we are very willing to help you with that. So missing persons are common. People do go missing. The positive thing is most people end up being recovered. But across the US, so when we look at NCIC for 2019, we are looking at, approximately 600,000 people go missing each year. Most of those people are recovered, right? And for various reasons, they are missing. Recovered does just mean recovered. Recovered does not necessarily meaning that they were found safe and well. Recovered means that maybe that the remains were recovered, their body was recovered, something like that. So I do want to let you know about that. But again, most people are not missing forever, but we do have those cases, and those are the cases that are so very challenging for law enforcement and very, very difficult for families. When your loved one has been missing for a long time and you do not know, and we talk about anniversaries year after year after year, the unknown. We actually have a case, and today marks the 33rd year, the anniversary that Susan Swedell has been missing. She was working at Kmart in Stillwater. It was actually a blizzard. She was driving home to Lake Elmo. She was seen at a gas station. Another car pulled in. She was seen talking to a man. The gas attendant believes she got into that car, and she has not been seen since. And that was 33 years ago. And so those cases for families are extremely difficult. And that's where we say we will continue to be with you and support you regardless of time, age, or circumstance. So you can see how the majority of people that go missing or reported missing our juveniles are under the age of 21. And then you can see that we do have adults that go missing. So for juveniles, we're looking, it's pretty even, male to female, but we look at females a little bit higher, and then it's just the opposite when we look at adults. This is for Minnesota. This is a typical year, but between 10,000 and 12,000 reports every year just in Minnesota, right? And so you can see how for the juvenile reports, a little over 7,300 reported, and then almost 7,300 canceled, meaning that person was recovered. So we do have some cases that are still open. It could be that they went missing, in December of 2020, and then they were recovered in January of 2021. So it's going to end up being a different year. So sometimes those numbers are a little kind of hard to read. But for the most part, we look at, most people that are reported missing are recovered. We did have endangered, so some of those did end up getting that designation as being endangered. Involuntary, again, those are the ones didn't quite know, possibly an accident, out hiking, out, doing something, maybe on water, those types of things. People with disabilities, so we can see, unfortunately, this happens more often than we would like. We have been working with some agencies about their, what they do when a person, they don't know where they are, right? And sometimes we have situations where they don't have recent pictures, they don't have policy and procedure, they have no idea when the last time somebody actually saw that person, so they don't know how long that person has truly been missing. They may not know what they were wearing, all of these things. So we do work with agencies to make sure that this is not something where someone can just walk out of a situation or walk out of an institution and someone delay in reporting or not having the information that law enforcement needs. Again, we had no catastrophe, and then the other typically are the adults. So you can see again, 11,252 and then 11,178. Those reports being canceled. So we always have open cases. The Minnesota BCA has a page where you can look up who's missing in Minnesota. We try to make sure we have those pictures again on our website. National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, you can look up according to state and find children who are missing there. And then NamUs, I'll talk about that. That's another database where you can look up missing persons. So Runaway Youth, again, this is, I think it's so important to know what the circumstances are in their life. For the most part, it's not just kids, going to have fun. Sometimes it is, right? But for the most part, we look at kids who, again, are running from something or they're running to someone. It was really interesting this spring, once the weather got a little bit nicer, we noticed that reports of missing adolescents do tend to go up when the weather is a little bit nicer. But with COVID, we had a couple calls from parents. It was like, my adolescent had, they're just feeling caged in, and I woke up this morning and they snuck out of their room. So we were having a little more of those cases than we typically did, just because COVID is just this extra pressure on kids and feeling like they needed to get out. But for the most part, when a juvenile leaves a home, no one knows where they are. They're not responding to calls. They're not responding to social media. They're typically not in a place that is good. And what I talk to law enforcement is this idea of, if you are 14, 15, 16, 17, and you are out on the streets, you have no resources. So one, you are either going to be taken advantage of, or you are going to have to take advantage of another person to get food shelter, all of these things. And this is a lot of times where we see, unfortunately, the risk for trafficking, and it could just be for safety, for food, for a place to sleep, right? For basic needs. And so it's really important that we say, if there's a juvenile out there, not having a safe place is not a good circumstance for them. So this is, again, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services defines runaway youth as one who is away from home without permission, at least overnight, right? Now, sometimes that people get confused and they say, oh my gosh, so that means I have to wait 24 hours or I have to wait till the next morning. Nope, you can still report, right? And we want people to report. And it could be as simple as your child just got on the wrong school bus, right? And so they got off the bus and right, they didn't recognize their stop. That's still a child that needs assistance, right? So we need to call that in and make sure that that's going on. Or a child that went home with a friend and they didn't know. These are some of the things, these are some of the calls we get, right? Child got on the wrong bus, they got off at the wrong bus stop, they went home with a friend, someone else picked them up. So I'll go through a checklist with you, but these are the things reporting helps to figure that out. And this is one of those things we talk about, better safe than sorry, right? We don't want to wait. Time is of the essence. We want to get that report in. And I can tell you, police are very happy when it ends up that, oh my gosh, they got on the wrong bus, but we found them, right? So we know that it's man work that goes behind it, but these are cases that have a happy ending that we want to make sure that we are working with law enforcement. Unfortunately, there is a term called throwaway youth. And throwaway youth are basically minors who are forced to leave their home for many reasons. There was actually a report that was done in Dallas, and throughout a year, they and we look at youth, and so there's truancy and things. So they're basically, picking up kids when they should be in school and asking them questions about it. And what they found, unfortunately, was a majority of the kids, they were high risk for trafficking. They had a trauma history, and no one had reported them missing. That's a throwaway kid. We should not have throwaway kids in our society, right? But unfortunately, that's a designation. And those kids are very high risk for being exploited, for being trafficked, for being victims of crime. No one's looking for them. No one knows they're missing. Basically, no one cares. That's where we have work to do. So runaway rates, unfortunately, a lot of times tend to be linked to abuse. And this is where we have to figure out, what are they running from? And we don't want to just recover that youth and then put them back in a situation that's not safe. So Protocol in Minnesota, they've really done a really nice job of doing some screening for adolescents who have run. And it's a 10 questionnaire, so it's not overwhelming, but it really gets at one, while they were on the run, did they have anything happen? Did they need some medical care? Those types of things. Were they trafficked? Did something happen? Exposure to drugs and alcohol. Do they need treatment? And then it gets at kind of, what were they running from? Were they experiencing abuse at home or an unsafe situation that they felt like they had no choice? So those are some of the things that we are improving. We're not quite there yet. Again, elevated risk. So we want to look at this, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children does look at, for those kids who are reported as runaway, right? So missing adolescent, 1 of 7, most likely a victim of child sex trafficking. They actually just put out a new statistic, and they're looking at it's more like 1 in 6. So of all of the adolescents that go missing, 1 in 6 most likely experiencing trafficking while they're on the run. So these are the cases where we have to do some intervention. We have to be, looking for these kids, recovering these kids, and then making sure that they are getting the services that they need. So from a parent's perspective, I just thought this was really interesting because we kind of have two sides, and we do a lot of victim blaming in a lot of components of what we work in. And I think this just really underscores that. So this was a training that I was at for the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And this was a parent that was talking about her daughter who had met someone online, and then was missing with this perpetrator for an extended time. And she says, I come into your house, right? And I take your kid. I'm a kidnapper. You come out of your house, meaning this girl, you're a runaway. I take a picture of you. I'm an offender. You take a picture of yourself. You're a risky teen. Right? And then we look at this and we call this compliant behavior. She willingly left the house. She willingly took a photo of herself. We have to do a better job of understanding the dynamics of exploitation and what goes on, and why, of course, these young people would either take pictures of themselves or why they would leave with someone that they don't know. So let's get into kind of what to do. And I do also, I sent Sarah two different formats. One is what to do if a child is missing and an adult missing checklist. So most of these things are going to be both child and adult, but you'll kind of see some other things. But again, this is in the heat of the moment, you were like, oh my gosh, I don't know where my child is, right? These are some things that we want you to do. We want you to go from the, oh my God, I'm frozen in fear, to, okay, these are some things that I can do. And knowing that you can always call us to help you through that. So one thing that most stores have is what's called Code Adam. So most of you are probably familiar with Adam Walsh, who went missing at a Sears store at a mall in Florida, and his parents, John Walsh and Renee, it's not Renee, sorry, I lost her name, but they created the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So Code Adam, if you alert someone in a store that you cannot find your child, what they will do is they will close all the doors and then they will make an announcement of Code Adam. And they take it very seriously. So it is really important, again, for advocacy to go to your local Target or Cub Foods or, store and say, do you have Code Adam? Are you familiar with Code Adam? I was at Joann Fabrics with my husband and my daughter. And I said to my husband, oh my gosh, have you seen Elizabeth? I'm looking for Elizabeth, who's my daughter. And right away, someone from Joann's came over and said, do we need to do a Code Adam? And luckily I knew what that was, right? Because probably another parent would be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, oh my gosh, no, my daughter, it is my daughter, but she's 25. So we don't need to do a Code Adam. But they were very responsive, right? Right away, they heard me say that and they came up and said that. Calling 911, right? This is not, don't worry about calling your local, right? Looking up that number, that non-emergency number, calling 911 and saying, I cannot find my child is missing, right? Or a loved one is missing. This is information that is very helpful. Providing the time and the location that that person was last seen. And it may be that you saw them last or someone else saw them last. So again, knowing the person, the name of the person, when they last saw them, where they saw them. Having a description. So this is something too that we tell parents to do is, maybe on your child's birthday once a year or maybe a couple times a year, is to just take a picture of them on your cell phone. So take a close-up of their face and take a close-up of their body, right? And it's something we don't want to scare, I'm going to take this picture because in case you go missing, I have it, right? But we want, again, to tell children, hey, we just want to have this if there's ever a time that maybe, and it's funny because we talk to kids and parents, and when we're doing prevention ed, and I'll say, if you're at Target and your mom gets lost, right? Or you're at Cub Foods and your mom wanders away from you. This is what you should do. Go to someone that works at the store, right? So we can say it in a way that's not scary. But just say, if I get separated from you at Target, I want to make sure that I have your picture. Because sometimes in the heat of the moment, it's, where's that picture? I can't find that picture, right? So you have it. The height, the weight, the eye color, the hair color. If you are working with an adolescent that changes their hair color or changes the style of their hair, if it's possible to have multiple pictures so that that child can be recognized. Anything unique, descriptive to the child. So law enforcement will ask about tattoos or birthmarks or piercings or any of those things. So think about anything that sets your missing person different from someone else, right? So what is it that they would look at the person and say, I can identify you by this? It could be something, it could be a scar, could be braces, could be, right, any of those types of things. At least 3 photographs. And I always tell parents to find one of your child not smiling or your loved one not smiling. If they are in a situation where they are not safe, if someone sees them, they probably won't be smiling, right? And people look very different when they show different emotions. So if they're, if you have a way to have a picture of, your child or your loved one that's not smiling. Profile pictures also are very helpful. So, at least 3 pictures where they look a little different in each picture. We know that photos work. We know that children are identified by photos. So please don't think that this is busy work or something that doesn't matter. We know that the posters work. We know that people look at them, and we know that people recognize children and they recognize missing persons because they have seen those photos. Report anything out of the usual, right? Was there a change in custody? Was there a change in their sleep patterns? Was there a change, something going on at school? Did they have a breakup? Did someone recently pass away, right? Just anything you can think of that made the world different for your child. That's really what we're looking at. Certainly any special needs medication they're supposed to be on, a diagnosis that they have. This again could help get them from the category of just that juvenile runaway to being endangered. Social media is huge, right? So if you can share with law enforcement phones, passwords, any social media that they're on, and again, do you have passwords? Do they have accounts that you don't know of? All of those types of things. That's a lot of times that what we find when there is a young person that has gone missing, that they have, multiple accounts and the parents didn't know. But letting law enforcement know about those places that they go, a list of friends, this is where you just want to brainstorm anywhere this person can be, anyone they may be with, right? All of those things. For children, we look at any adults that may have had access to your child. In the world of child abuse and child maltreatment, we know for the most part, children are harmed by someone they know, love, and trust, and someone who has access to them. So again, who are the adults that have access to your child, maybe seem to spend extra time with your child, right? Those are the things we don't want to think about, but those are the things if someone is missing, we want to make a list of those. I usually tell families, have a notebook and write everything down, because in a state of trauma, your long-term memory and short-term memory is really out the door, right? And you are going to have contact with so many different people and possibly different agencies. You can't keep it straight, and that is not your fault. So in a notebook, you're going to put names, You're going to put, for law enforcement, the badge number. You're going to put the case number. You're going to put, right, all of these different things. If you call us, I talked to Jan Straub at Jacob Wetterling Resource Center. Here's her number. Here's her email. These are the things that she stated would be helpful to do, right? So keep a notebook, write it down. Again, sometimes you're talking to law enforcement, you're talking to different people, and then they may ask you, well, who did you talk to at this agency? Who is your contact here, right? And then you have that information. The case number is very important, and the name of the law enforcement person who is assigned to your case. Very important information. Asking law enforcement, what is the phone number that you will be listing if we make a poster that people can call? Calling the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They have a 1-800 number that you can call 24 hours a day. Sometimes law enforcement will do this. A lot of times this does fall on the family. Calling us if you are looking for extra support. Again, we have a 1-800 number that you can call 24 hours a day, and an advocate will answer. The National Runaway Safeline, and again, I have some screens for these. These are just extra resources. NamUs is also another database that you can call. Once you get a poster, sharing that poster, we can help you do that. But social media has become a godsend to missing persons. The ability to reach millions of people in a very short time makes a huge difference. And again, we have found on a lot of our cases that picture gets shared and people recognize and people are found. So we're going to use every resource that we have available. Creating a social media presence. Sometimes people will create a missing with that person name. And again, we can help you do that. Contacting local media. JWRC has a wonderful relationship with local media. We're very fortunate to have that. They have been very helpful on some cases that have needed some extra eyes in media. So if that's something you need, we really can help you with that. Most local media does have on their website or a number that you can call with news, or if you have a tip or something going on in your community. So you can call and let them know about a missing person report. And it's really important to have a family spokesperson. So that person who can be the one who talks to the media. You may have somebody else who is the person that connects with law enforcement, right? But just having that person that can remain maybe calm under pressure, that has the ability to do that. Not everybody does, right? And it's not where you don't look at this and say, oh, what's that person's problem? They can't talk to media. Under stress, we never know what people's capacity is, and we never judge people on that. So if there's one person who can remain calm under pressure, that's a wonderful person to have as your spokesperson. So again, most of these things also for adults, but we know for the most part with missing persons, we're dealing with people under the age of 18. So the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, they try to keep a very easy phone number, 1-800-THE-LOST. So what does the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children do? They keep a lot of data, and they also help with cases. They have them split up, again, similar to NCIC, but a little bit different. And you can see the cases that they have. They typically get about 29,000 cases a year. So not everyone with missing child contacts NCMEC. Again, this is something that NCMEC will not reach out to you. We as an organization do not reach out to missing families. It's complicated, right? But we try to get our name out there so people say, we are looking for you as a resource. We do not want to be viewed as kind of an ambulance chaser, right? if you're looking for our service, we would love, a lot of times law enforcement will say we're available as a resource. Sometimes people may say, hey, have you called Jacob Wetterling Resource Center? Right. So we just want you to know we are an organization like that. NEC is an organization like that, reaching out to us. So they have, most of their cases are the endangered runaways. They also have family abduction. Those cases are far greater than the general public understands. We do try to work with media to highlight some of these cases because I think unfortunately people think, oh, if they're with a parent, they're safe. And we have found, unfortunately, that is not always the case. When you have a situation where you have an adult who gets to the point where they are actually taking and kidnapping their own child, there's a lot of things going on there, right? And it could be a safety issue for that parent and for that child. But what we have found most of the time is that taking parent is the one who is not the safe parent. And so they work on a lot of those cases. They do have the category of lost, missing, otherwise. And then they have the young adult. And then you can see non-family abduction is the smallest piece of the pie. Those are what we call stranger abductions. Those are what most people think most missing child cases are, and they are the fewest. So again, when we look at all of these that go on, we look at less than 1% are the Jacob style cases, right? But these are the cases that get all the headlines. These are the cases that are on the news. And part of it is because it's completely unknown, right? Law enforcement has no idea. So this is why they do reach out to media and they do say, we need this blasted everywhere because we have no idea where this child is. For the most part, when a child goes missing or there's child maltreatment, it's a person very well known and connected to the child. So it's not that law enforcement needs help identifying the person. For the most part, they know who that person is, right? So unfortunately, it's very skewed with media. And so it leads people to believe most missing person cases are that typical stranger kidnapping, and they are not. So here again, we can look at abducted by a family member, 230,000, almost 231,000. This is kind of one of those unknown problems. This is a situation that is not, children are at risk when these things are happening. The runaway, thrown away, they're told to leave, 400,000. And then, right, missing due to misunderstanding, right? Those are the cases. Forgot to tell mom I was staying at a friend's, got on the wrong school bus, right? Lost track of time, right? These do happen, right? And then abducted by a non-family member, too few cases to analyze. So this is the information that when we work, we really tried to get that information out, right? Not that stranger cases do not happen, but it's less likely that it will be a complete stranger. So again, family abduction, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just kind of looking at, is it a situation where it is that parent? And a lot of times when you hear the Amber Alerts, it is a non-custodial parent who has taken that child. I would say probably 75% of those, it's a non-custodial parent or someone, very close to that child who has taken that child without legal permission. These are cases that we do get calls on. It is non-compliant custody. It is a parent, they did not bring the child back when they were supposed to. They're not supposed to take the child out of state, right? All of these different things. These are cases that tend to need some advocacy with law enforcement, and we're very happy to do that because sometimes, again, law enforcement is not educated on these cases. They do not understand the risk that children may be at, and we do have some risk factors that we look at to see if potentially that could be a dangerous parent. And a lot of times law enforcement has never had that training. They're just thinking, hey, they're with the other parent, they're okay, they're safe, there's not a problem. And so this is where we do a lot of education. So if you have that situation, please reach out. These are cases that we can help with. There's something called parental alienation. This is very damaging to children. And I just think this quote really helps to underscore that again. Parents who try to alienate their child from the other parent, if they're doing it a subtle way or overtly, can convey a three-part message to their child. I'm the only parent that loves you. You need to feel, it's only me. The other parent is dangerous, or they're unavailable to you, right? And if you try to have a relationship with that parent, you're jeopardizing your relationship with me. And you can see how damaging that can be to a child. Now, there are circumstances, of course, where that other parent may not be a safe parent, but the dynamics here are huge. And a lot of times it is the child who really is damaged by the dynamics that go on with parental alienation. So the other thing that NCMEC does is it provides the cyber tip line. The cyber tip line has, it receives 10 to 15 million calls a year. Now we know that exploitation is very much linked to children who are missing or things going on, which is why I'm talking about this. You can call the cyber tip line if you suspect there's exploitation, if your child is sent images that they shouldn't see, if someone is requesting images from your child, right? It's across the gamut. So again, you can reach out to us and say, hey, this is a situation going on. Should I report this? Is this, what should I do? The wonderful thing about the cyber tip line is it has the availability. It has amazing people that do the cyber tip line. Some of them are retired FBI, retired CIA, retired law enforcement. They have a database that's able to go through and link patterns that the human eye cannot see. They are able to take pictures and identify victims every single day. They are able to identify locations, right? So these are things that if you have a tip, if there's something going on, we ask you to call the cyber tip line. The other thing also is to call NCMEC with attempted abductions. There may be a case where a child was walking home and a car pulled up and said, hey, get in my car, and the child ran away and they were safe. Still report those. Report those to local law enforcement. Ideally, local law enforcement will be reporting those to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, but we always say it doesn't hurt to also report yourself. What they do is they also look at patterns. They have been able to identify potential offenders that have been identified on a map, right? They'll, the location of the car, the type of the car, what that person looks like, and again, finding patterns that the human eye could not potentially put together. So there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, and this is also what I tell families who have a missing loved one is a lot of the time law enforcement is doing work and they're not able to really tell you what they're doing because it's an active investigation, right? So don't assume that nothing is going on. Just know that sometimes they are unable to let you know what's going on. So I think that's really important because sometimes people think I reported and nobody's doing anything about it. It also is going to, make a difference how much resources they have. And again, if it's considered just juvenile runaway, missing adult, or it has that endangered component to it. So Team Hope is out of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. This is where you can get a peer support system. So if you have a missing child and you would like to talk to another parent about that, they will connect you and you can have that peer support if your child has been exploited. So what they do is they connect you with another parent who has a similar scenario. And again, this is not an investigator. This is just purely peer support. And what we have found, parents have found this extremely helpful. And it's hard to see, but down at the bottom of the heart is Patty Wetterling. And then just next to her is a woman, Colleen Nick. Colleen Nick has a daughter, Morgan Nick, who has been missing almost as long as Jacob was missing. She is missing out of Arkansas, and the Morgan Nick Foundation is similar to the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center. But Patty and Colleen actually founded Team Hope, this parent support system, and it has helped over 700,000 parents who have had either a missing or exploited child. So again, it's just this extra support when you're in that situation. So the National Runaway Safeline, this is myself and Allison Fay and one of our previous workers, Stephanie Randolph. We were actually recognized as a partner organization for the month, but the National Runaway Safeline, this is something, a place that you can call if you have a missing, record a message for them. So if your child is somewhere and they happen to call, they can put in their name, and if there's a message there from you, it will play it, right? And that is a wonderful thing because a lot of kids do run, and they feel like they're not able to come back home. So they can call and they get that message from someone saying, I love you, right? We want you to come home. We can figure this out. You're not in trouble, right? Whatever you want to record, they can provide services for the child, and they can help to get transportation for your child to get back home, right? A lot of times the National Runaway Safeline is posted at bus stations, on light rail. It's places, it's posted where a lot of times youth will see it, so they can call and they can get services. So we want adults to know about this. We want young people to know about it. The National Missing and Unidentified Person System. So this is called NamUs. This is another database that many people are unaware of. This is a place where typical average person can have access to it. So you can see family members of missing persons are empowered with tools to search and enter their missing loved ones into NamUs. We were asked by the Minnesota Bureau of the BCA a couple of years ago. They held sites 5 different places across the U.S. or across Minnesota, and what they were trying to do was to get people who never reported a missing loved one and child to come in and to report a case so it could be added to. I would ask all of you to go onto the website. You can put in names, you can put in cities, you can put in states, and it will show you all of the missing persons who are in this. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit later, but when we talk about Native American and Alaskan natives names, one of the demographics that is there a way that we can release that system? So we see a disconnect between all of the demographics of people that go missing and the people that get put into databases. So this is one of the things that we really are trying to work on, which is why I'm very grateful to Sarah for being able to do this training. So we look at NamUs, and again, we can see, right, all of the missing people that go missing in a year, and you can see the Republic signed or get solved. Then we have a category called unidentified persons. These are remains to be identified. This is why it's also important for people to put their missing loved ones where it was a missing adult, and it was a time that law enforcement didn't take adult cases, or whatever the situation may be, or they were missing. We just hadn't heard it from that person for a long time. We kind of thought that was normal, but now it's been, or they haven't reached out, or they're not cashing their checks, or whatever else may be going on. So entering that person in. And then we have what's called unclaimed persons. So these are people that have actually been the body, right? So these are some of the things that we think, how could this happen, right? But again, a lot of people just do not know that this database is available, but it has a public component. There is a law enforcement component, so there are parts of NamUs that you don't have access to, but for the most part, general public can go in, they can search, they can add people. And what we want to do is we want to make sure every missing person is in some kind of database. Every human remain that is found has the ability to be identified, and no person should remain unclaimed. So these are some of the, again, some of the things. And we talk about nation silent disasters. So again, we look at, in a given year, 600,000 people reported missing. Most of those people are recovered. But every year we're looking at approximately 4,000 remains that continue to be unidentified. So we need that database to be expanded. I'll talk a little bit about missing and murdered Indigenous women. So talking about the red dress, we have this whole other category of missing and murdered that is not in all the databases, underrepresented, a lot of barriers, a lot of things going on, but huge victimization and huge amounts of missing and homicide cases. And these should not be forgotten, and these should. Urban Indian Health Institute, and this may not be, but hopefully this is information that is helpful. So Urban Institute Health Institute, they wanted to get an accurate record of all of the missing and murdered Indigenous women across the United States. So what they did is they picked 71 cities in 29 states. And what they were looking at is they wanted to kind of get an idea of what they called urban Indians. So they're looking at, according to Urban Indian Health Institute, of Native Americans live in urban areas, not part of federally designated tribal land, right? So they're basically living in cities. And so they wanted to, say of women that go missing or murdered, do these women end up in databases? This is how they tried to count. They load how many of those are categorized as Native American, Alaskan Native. They look at state and national databases, right? So they're looking at every state, like our BCA. They're looking at the state missing person clearinghouse. They're looking at NamUs. They're looking at media coverage of who got media coverage for being missing. They look at social media, and they're contacting family members. Ran into trying to account and try to, find out how many, what are we talking about? How many women should be in this database? Not entered. They had issues accessing data. So there's the Freedom of Information Act. Some law enforcement was not willing to share data. Some law enforcement would share data, but they wanted fees associated to it. They ran into a huge issue of racial misclassification. So they were not classified as Native American or Alaskan Native. They may have been misclassified, or they had no classification. When they were reported missing, 75% had no tribal affiliation denoted with them. So that was another question that was not asked or was not provided. So that was just unknown. They're looking at institutional racism. Why were these women not reported? What was going on? What were barriers that even reported a missing person report being made? Again, we look at, did the person go missing in an urban area? Did they go missing in a rural area? Did they go missing in a tribal designated land, or with databases and different things not talking and being connected with each other? What are law enforcement relationships? What do those look like, right? Is this a family that would report or wouldn't report? And then we look at media relationships, right? What does media typically cover versus what don't they cover? And so what they found, and I'll go over these because they're kind of hard to read, but so we can say, wow, that's pretty low. 128 of them, so these were found in a database or families talked about it or they found it in media. 128 of us women, 280 were categorized as murdered Indigenous women. Now, sometimes it's both, right? Sometimes we have a missing person and they end up being murdered. And sometimes what happens is not both of those are counted. Even with our database, we received victim assistance funding from OJP. We have missing person as a category, but it's not really considered a crime. And I can tell you, most of our cases where we have a missing person, there ends up being a crime, right? And so we have this kind of disconnect between even those two categories. Didn't even know anything about it. And then the average age was 29, right? So we can say, wow, over 71 cities, hard to believe that there were only 506 women who were accounted for. They called what was called the invisible 153. So these were missing person, or maybe the media talked about, but they were not entered in any law enforcement records, right? There was not one database that these women were in. 5,700 women who are classified as Native American or Alaskan Native were put into city databases, state databases. Only 116 of those made it into the NamUs data. And it should not be on the shoulders of families, but this is where we really have to work to get information out, to make sure everyone is reported, to make sure everybody gets in the database. The other thing with this institute study was what they found, their records did not go back very far. So 2/3 of the reports they got were between 2010 and 2018. So if there was a missing woman before that, before 20, and that too is where we go back to, it could have been in 2002, your sister, your aunt, your mom, your sister went missing, and you went to law enforcement and they said, we don't take reports for missing it, right? They could be someone who has been recovered and we don't know who they are. They could be a victim of a crime, right? Just not there. We want you to know you are never alone. We are here. We will work with you. We continue to work with you. We work very hard at getting information out there. Every May 25th, and it sometimes ends up being on Memorial Day, but every May 25th is called National Missing Children's Day. At JWRC, we just call it Missing Persons Day, children, but we also think it's very important to be talking about adults as well. Enforcement across Minnesota to have a Missing Person Day Minnesota. We would just love to have everybody represented and say not just children, but these are all of the people in Minnesota, and not all of them are listed in the BCA website. Not all of the children are listed with NACMEC. Not all of the people are in the NAMES database. So we have many, many missing people who are unaccounted for, but their loved ones know that they're missing. So we need to work on that. We also have the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Walk that happens every February 14th, but unfortunately, probably not this year. That brings awareness to what's going on, right? Bringing awareness does a couple of things. It lets opportunity for someone to say, me too, I also have this, right? I have a missing person that I love and I don't know where they are, right? And I'm not alone. We also have the National Day of Awareness on May 5th, wearing red in honor of National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. A lot of these are focused at women and girls. We know that boys and men also go missing and they are not excluded. But bringing awareness and saying, we want everyone that is missing to be accounted for, right? We don't want families to have to do this on their own. We are here to support you. We have a new law. We have Savannah's Act, again, which is very much focused on missing, right? Making sure they're in a database, making sure that a tribal database is connected to a state database, is connected to a national database, right? So it's not this standalone or people don't know what to do with a missing person report, right? So it's that Savannah's Act does regarding missing persons. The other law that was signed is Not Invisible Act, and that is looking at especially violence against Native women and murdered Native women, right? So looking at sexual violence, domestic violence. How can we get ahead of this, right? This is something that's going on. This is something that we need to solve. Now, things, but a lot of times they help bring awareness and they help to bring funding. Ambiguous loss. This is a wonderful resource that we give to families that have a missing loved one who has been missing for gone for over a year. And it's an awesome name, right? My name is Dr. Boss, and she is wonderful. And I love to, when I see her, to go, hello, Dr. Boss. But ambiguous loss is, it's very complicated. It's complicated grief because it is unknown. You don't have answers. You don't have closure. You don't know what's going on. It's just this thing that kind of sits out there, and you don't, and saying that grief that you're feeling, that loss that you're feeling, that's ambiguous because there are no answers, right? And we have this idea of it's that person's birthday. Now it's the special holiday. Now this person is this family member is getting married, and there's always this person who's missing, that's not there, and that's really difficult for families. They leave without saying goodbye, right? We don't know what's going on. We don't know where they are. We don't know what to do with, but unresolved and not really understanding what that is sometimes can lead to depression. So it's very important that families of missing kind of understand what that is. There's a name for it. You're not crazy and you're not alone. Allison Fay, she's the director of Jacob Wetterling Resource Center, and she has a wonderful book that she wrote called On Those Runaway Days. That's for children, and it's just this idea of we want to do prevention, and we want to do prevention that's not scary, but we want to talk to kids about what they do with these big feelings, right? And it should not stop when we have adolescents. Sometimes adolescents have really big feelings and they don't know what to do with. And sometimes, and especially when I talk to adolescents, I talk about that is expected. When you are an adolescent, it is expected you will have problems that you cannot solve on your own and problems that are way above your pay grade, which brings us back to that net of five. We need to keep those conversations going. This is Missy Johnson. Missy was a student at St. Cloud State University. She got home from waitressing job and she was out walking her dog. She unfortunately happened to be walking her dog the same time as serial rapist drove by her and saw her and took her. This is also the work that we work with, this idea of perpetrators become perpetrators, right? So not just understanding the victimization side of it, that we do is where we say we're not alone. We'll reach out to Allison and I. We understand this complicated area of missing persons and understand when it is a missing loved one that goes missing. We will help you work through systems. We will help you navigate. We never want you to do it alone. It does not matter how old that person is. It does not matter how long they've been missing. It does not matter the circumstances of why they're missing. Loss, trauma, and resilience, and the long-term missing. J.C. Dugard, we know that missing persons come home every day. We know that missing children are found every day, and we will never give up. So she is just one of the people that we look at and say, there's a lot of people that probably thought no one would ever see JC again, but she was found. So we never give up. Answers are important. We don't call it closure. We call it answers. We may have a missing person that's recovered. They may be recovered safely. They may be recovered deceased, but it is so important for families to have answers, and we will never give up. All right, Sarah, do we have questions, or does anybody?
We do have some questions.
Anyone?
What would be your preferred way to take them? Do you want me to read them out or have people ask themselves?
Either. Why don't you read them? They can certainly unmute themselves.
Okay, so we have one question that is about alternatives to law enforcement in finding missing persons. Like, what kind of, are there community response teams out there or other grassroots ways that families can search for someone?
Yes. Yes. So the issue that typically comes with organizations is their Center for Missing Children, all of those, is that that person has to be legally reported as missing. And part of it is just person's rights. Like if someone just decided to leave somewhere and they want to be where they are, and all of a sudden they're reported missing and they're not really missing, there's kind of a lot of complications with that. We know that there are issues with relationships with law enforcement, and so that is certainly something that we can help to work with and kind of navigate that system. But most search agencies and other resources, that person has to legally be reported as missing.
What are some signs that someone has gone missing versus just, I haven't seen them in a while?
Yeah, a lot of it is their personality, right? So it's out of character. There has been something going on that has just maybe not been quite right. If it's somebody that, you know, they check in or they talk to this person once a week or every day and they haven't, they have responsibilities that they haven't been doing, like not showing up for work, and that's out of character, right? Just any of those things where it kind of going back to that gut reaction of something doesn't feel right here, right? A lot of times if someone needs space, they let someone know, right? So it's, again, that's why it's really important to reach out to everybody, you know, especially if it is an adult, to reach out to everybody and just say, hey, have you heard from this person? Because it may be, oh my God, you know, I let Jane know that I was just having a rough time and I needed to go up to my parents' cabin for the weekend, right? But I always tell people, you know, 48 hours missing, and she has kids and she didn't show up for her job, but her husband or boyfriend says he thinks she just got a new boyfriend and just left. That doesn't happen, right? That rarely happens. So out of character, it just doesn't feel right. That gut reaction. And this is where I tell people, if you need a break and you just need space, at least let someone know, right? Because we don't want you reported missing if you're not missing. So if you are just like, I'm overwhelmed, I have to get out of here for a while, please let someone know.
So that was the last of the questions that I have. Do other people have questions? Okay, well, Jane, thank you so very much for talking with us. I really learned a lot about a subject that impacts so many of our relatives and our own lives. So thank you so very much for spending time with us.
You are
and
welcome.
Thank you to everyone who attended.
And please, you know, I know a lot of times there's questions people don't want to ask in an open format. So please, email's the best because we're working remotely. Please email me if you have questions, concerns, you know, something going on. We are here and we would like to be here. And so thank you so much for this opportunity. Any chance we have to get this information out, it's just so important. And I know there is the new, you know, task force across the US and across Minnesota on missing and murdered Indigenous women. And we're not part of that task force. So if there's, you know, anything that we do that you can share, if any of you are part of that, we would love to share our resources.
All right, well, everyone have a glorious day, stay safe, and take care of one another.